but I think that there were a lot of people in the fantasy industry who had Jalen Hurts as the number one quarterback going into this season. Dave, you and I were not any of those people, but we're seeing that there's he really was. Okay, all right,
draft
cool.
QB1, yeah.
Okay, all right. Wow. Our relationship, not where I
Hurts, Allen, Mahomes were my top three in that order.
You think you would know your best friend's QB1? You think you would know?
You're making some assumptions here, thinking that Dave is my best friend. We're jumping into week 5 with our updated rest of season rankings. Let's start off, okay, with tier number 1 for our quarterbacks and the rest of the season rankings. And I guess this one's obvious, maybe not, but we're going to start out with Josh Allen, okay? Josh Allen, as of right now, taking a look at it, QB2 on the season, 22 or more fantasy points in his last 3 games. He threw 3 interceptions in week 1, which is obviously holding him back a little bit, but since then, just 1 interception and 10 total touchdowns. He's got a very beatable upcoming schedule. Harms, are we thinking of this the right way to have Josh Allen as QB1 for the rest of the season?
I definitely think so. And when you go back to just week 1, I think that they focused a lot on what he did in that game. It was a lot of push the ball down the field. And now we're seeing a more calculated Josh Allen. It's not, I'm just going to run and take and put everything into my own hands. I'm going to spread the ball around to my different playmakers. And, you can tell he's only got, 16 actual rushes on the season. But still, he's being efficient with it. He has 106 yards. He has 2 rushing touchdowns. We still expect that to go up. And even against the Dolphins, I'm not just going to take off. I'm going to sit in the pocket. I'm going to extend. And when you can extend.
Too soon, Daniel. Too soon. Why are you hurting me like this?
I'm trying to go through it quickly, but you decided you wanted to just stop on it and pause. I'm trying to save you as much pain as I could. And that was really the big takeaway for me, is that Josh Allen looked and took that week 1 in stride, and he was just like, I can't play like that. Coaching staff did it. Ken Dorsey has been drawing up some fantastic plays. They're getting the run game going with 2 tight ends on the field. I know everyone's waiting for the Dalton Kincaid breakout, but right now Josh Allen is distributing the football, and it's allowing him to be the best version of himself. And when this team gets rolling, I mean, they put up 30, 40 points weekly. So yeah, Josh Allen's definitely the guy right now for the rest of the season that I want to start.
He's actually rushing a lot less. He is almost at a career low in rushing output per game, but he's just throwing the ball better than we've ever seen. So I think, people get so blinded by wanting to stack players early in the offseason. And I think that's why, no disrespect to Patrick Mahomes, he was the QB1 last year, but I think that's why he was getting drafted as the QB1. People would draft Travis Kelce in the first round, and then they would desperately want that stack with Patrick Mahomes and take him as the first QB off the board. But really, we should have known that Josh Allen had this in his range of outcomes. There's no reason. I'm pretty sure unanimously when we ranked these players, we all had Josh Allen as the QB1. I think if we were redrafting right now with what we've seen through the first 4 weeks of the season, Josh Allen would be the first quarterback off the board in just about every draft.
Yeah, Josh Allen, quarterback 1 in fantasy in 2020, in 2021, and then last season he was the quarterback 2. Yeah. This year, he's currently the quarterback 2.
Yeah, oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I think we're finally seeing the floor fall out from him. He's quarterback 2. Oh no. So Josh Allen is our quarterback 1 for the rest of season ranks. Dave, Patrick Mahomes is our quarterback number 2 here. As of right now, Daniel, cover your ears. Quarterback 8 on the season. Week 4 was his worst performance since week 13 of 2021. That's how long it's been since Patrick Mahomes has had this bad of a fantasy performance. As we just talked about with Josh Allen, I'm sure that didn't really have too much to do with Mahomes being number 2 on this list. He's got a pretty solid upcoming schedule here. Minnesota, Denver, the Chargers, and Denver again. He's actually got the easiest remaining strength of schedule for any quarterback in the NFL in terms of fantasy points. Dave, is this the proper place to have Patrick Mahomes? Is it crazy to think that he could be lower than quarterback 2 in the season?
No, I think you're still getting a rock-solid floor with Patrick Mahomes. I'm not going to get too concerned about the Week 4 outing. Week 1 wasn't a great game either. I appreciate that you threw this to me to talk about Patrick Mahomes, but I actually want to get Daniel's opinion on this more. Being a Chiefs guy who breaks down the film all the time, but what I've seen in so far in the season, Travis Kelce has been far from 100%. And when we see Travis Kelce, obviously didn't play in week 1, extremely limited in week 2, but even in weeks 3 and 4, he was kind of hobbling around on the field, didn't look like his old self. I think that as Travis Kelce gets healthier, we see it unlock the passing game a little bit more. Daniel, would you kind of agree with that? That maybe some of these injuries to Travis Kelce are kind of why we're seeing this slow start from Mahomes so far?
You combine Travis Kelce's ineffectiveness getting open right now with an injury, which I'll be honest with you, he's still doing what he does in zone coverage, but he's not exactly opening up against man right now as quickly as you'd like him to.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get into those 30, 33, 34-year-old bodies, and a guy who has been an Iron Man for the most of his career, that bone bruise, they've talked about a deep bone bruise. Typically, that can be, 2 to 4 weeks until you're fully healthy. That's if you're resting. Travis was like, I'm on the field next week. He tried to play the week he got hurt. So that's going to make it even worse. But I agree. He's going to get healthier. And when he does, I think I know it's a long way out, but that bye week for the Chiefs is probably what we're looking at for when they actually start to really take off as an offense. I do think that the game against the Jets was a wake-up call. They got to do some different things to get players actually moving. And the defense that the Jets were really running was a lot of cover 4 with man coverage, which is not necessarily what they want to do in with the Jets. Robert Salah is really more of a cover 3 guy, but he's got such a really good handle on running defenses and how to switch things up and make guys uncomfortable. And they did that with Patrick Mahomes when they started to get dialed in. So again, the schedule for Patrick is fantastic coming up.
Mm-hmm.
It's Patrick Mahomes. Like I'm never like, I even struggled with when we initially started doing this. Do I want to have him down closer to 3 or 4? And then I look at the schedule. I remember, Andy Reid is still there. Patrick Mahomes is still there. Travis Kelce is going to get healthy. We all just kind of have to take a big sigh of relief here and just relax and rest and just let it happen, because Patrick's going to figure it out.
And now what I will say too is, like, right now when we're looking at these rankings, these guys are all in a tier together, and we might have Patrick Mahomes at QB2, but I don't think there's a huge gap between who we have QB2, Patrick Mahomes, and the next 2 guys at QB3 and QB4. I think it's kind of flat there. I think you can give the slight edge to Josh Allen as the consensus QB1, but QB2, QB3, QB4 are all pretty tight together.
Yeah, and I think if there's one quarterback that we can rely on to turn things around, it's Patrick Mahomes. And to put it as bluntly as possible, I think we've seen the floor for what he can be in this season. And I think that when you've seen the worst case scenario, it's pretty easy to assume everything will have an upward trajectory going forward here in the season. Now, if you're enjoying this video so far, we're only 2 quarterbacks in, but we're going to keep going here. If you're enjoying this, please like this video, click the thumbs up button, and make sure you are subscribed to the channel, because we're bringing you the show 4 times a week here on YouTube, and then we're giving you a Sunday morning live start sit. And we're not the only show here. You've got the Audible, you've got the Football Guys Dynasty show, you've got the Football Guys DFS show, and then we've got awesome content creators on this channel, just like Daniel, who are bringing you content every single week here. And if you have questions about who should I be starting this week? Should I be trading for this guy? Who do I need to pick up on waivers? Drop those questions in the comments below, and I get back to every single one of those. All right, gentlemen, let's move on to our third quarterback here. It's Jalen Hurts. This one has been interesting. I mean, we don't have him very low, but I think that there were a lot of people in the fantasy industry who had Jalen Hurts as the number 1 quarterback going into this season. Dave, you and I were not any of those people, but we're seeing that there's he really was. Okay, all right,
draft
cool.
QB1, yeah.
Okay, all right. Wow, our relationship not where I thought
Hurts, Allen, Mahomes were my top 3 in that order.
You think you would know your best friend's QB1? You think you would know?
You're making some assumptions here, thinking that Dave is my best friend. Okay, so Jalen Hurts right now, it's been interesting because this year, averaging 4 less fantasy points per game than last year. I mean, last year was just a phenomenal performance for him, especially in the rushing department and the touchdowns. We're still seeing teams cannot stop the tush push as they get closer to the goal line. Crazy thing is that even though he's averaging 4 less points, he's still the quarterback 5 in fantasy. Mm-hmm. I will say this. He's got the 3rd hardest remaining strength of schedule. Daniel, I want to throw this to you because when we talk about strength of schedule and what this means for a quarterback's fantasy production, for guys like Jalen Hurts that run the ball so well, I don't know how much of that really applies. Is that something that you take into consideration going forward?
Yeah, I think you have to. And I think when we look specifically at defenses, defensive team speed is what really impacts those rushing quarterbacks. So last week against with the Chiefs and the Jets have really good team speed laterally. So they weren't not throwing any of their running back screens specifically because you have the ability from those linebackers to trigger downhill right into the areas, and they really blew them up. So they went to the outsides first. So Travis Kelce, a little bit of Kadarius Toney, and with the same kind of applies to Jalen Hurts, who is an excellent runner. They don't really want to get outside and run him that way against some team speed. So you have a little bit they have the Jets coming up in week 6 after the Rams, but they're really one of the only teams that have true everywhere team speed, especially laterally. You can probably factor in the Dallas Cowboys as well, who they will face twice down the stretch. So those are a couple games where his rushing floor might be a little bit less, but the big reason that his rushing floor is so high is because of the tush push. They just continuously vulture touchdowns from every running back on the roster. Even with DeAndre Swift finally getting into fantasy relevance this year, it doesn't really matter a ton for them because if they get on that 1 yard line, we all know what's coming. We all see it's happening. You can take those touchdowns. And also, I think they're finally getting a connection through the air. They had a couple of struggles early in the season. I think that was more of defenses saying, okay, well, we have all the film from last year, so we're going to try and take away some of your first read stuff, much like we saw the Buffalo Bills do again to the Miami Dolphins on Sunday. Take away some of the first reads. It can make a quarterback a little uncomfortable. And right now they're working through that. And that was really apparent and evident to me on Sunday when the Eagles had to take the Washington Commanders to overtime. But A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, right now, Dallas Goedert really isn't even being productive. I think that they need to get him going as well. When that happens, I mean, this offense is unstoppable.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, that tush push, the brotherly shove, whatever we want to call it. I mean, it really is, and it's kind of funny too because we've been talking about it.
Shove.
I think the brotherly shove is only what we can call it when Philly runs it. But it's funny, we saw the Giants try to run it yesterday. We saw New England try to run it on Sunday, and all these other teams can't run it successfully. And like we've been asking for years, like why aren't other teams trying to do this? Well, it turns out that when you have the league's best offensive line and a quarterback who could squat 600 plus pounds, it does make it a little bit easier. But I mean, he is scoring a rushing touchdown in almost 85% of his games dating back to last year. He's on pace for almost 15 rushing touchdowns this year. I mean, death, taxes, and Jalen Hurts falling into the end zone. You could bet on it just about every single week. And his passing yards per game are down, rushing yards per game are down. But that the rushing touchdown upside that he has any given week just gives him such a safe floor, such a safe ceiling. And week 1 was kind of weird. We talked about it in the offseason that people were paying up for these elite quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts had a pretty quiet week 1, just 12.5 points. Lamar Jackson, 7.6 points. Josh Allen, 12 points. So all of these people that spent up in like the second, third, fourth round for a quarterback had a pretty nasty taste in their mouth, but all of these guys have turned it on since week 2. And yeah, Jalen Hurts, top 3, top 4, top 5, whatever you want to call it, quarterback going forward.
Yeah, Dave, and to kind of pinpoint what you're talking about there of seeing kind of this floor for Jalen Hurts, I know that oftentimes when we talk about quarterbacks or these, single player positions, we talk about making sure we get upside. And these guys, Josh Allen, Mahomes, Hurts, and some of the other players we're going to talk about, we knew that they had upside. And the upside is, I'd say it's all relatively equal. Where you start to value these guys a bit more, and why I think so many people value Jalen Hurts a bit more is because you knew that you had that rushing floor always there. You always had that touchdown floor. And I mean, even having him, we're seeing points are down, but he's still a top 5 quarterback. I think we can all agree that might be the floor for Jalen Hurts. So yeah, I think it's appropriate to have him still here as quarterback 3.
And that's some of the guys we'll talk about later in the show. We talked about in the offseason, like could pass for a ton, but have that very shaky weekly floor. And we saw some of those last week. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But yeah, these rushing guys, they absolutely give you upside, but they also give you safety every single week. You're not going to see those 4, 5, 6 point weekly outings. They're going to get it done every single week with their rushing output.
Right. Let's move on to our quarterback number 4 here. He's the guy we loved in the preseason, and he's the quarterback 1 on the season. Justin Herbert, quarterback for the Los Angeles Chargers, and everyone had a lot of excitement for this quarterback going into the year. I don't know that there were too many people as high on Herbert as you and I, Dave. We really loved Justin Herbert. He was my quarterback 4 at the beginning of the year, right behind these guys. So my preseason rankings and rest of season rankings are actually this exact order that we had. Allen, Mahomes, Hurts, Herbert. This is exactly how I had it. I'm not saying that I'm a genius, but I'm also not saying that either. So, like I said, Justin Herbert, quarterback 1 in the season. He's got 10 total touchdowns this year. The biggest change for him has been the 3 rushing touchdowns already. He had 0 last season. Every year before that, he was averaging just around 3 to 4 rushing touchdowns per year. The big change was last year. He had that rib injury. It really, really messed him up. Dave, we're seeing a whole different Justin Herbert this year. A guy who's got a ton of confidence running the football, a guy who's willing to move around in the pocket a bit more than he was able to last year. And it looks like even without Mike Williams, Justin Herbert is just fine.
I mean, he's got Keenan Allen there, which we know is the true wide receiver 1. But not only is he doing this without Mike Williams for the last 2 weeks, he's done this without Austin Eckler, his safety valve, who picks up a ton of yards after the catch and scores touchdowns through the air.
Question, do you think that's been what's actually unlocked him? Is that he doesn't have his security blanket there anymore? He's having to do things that are a bit more creative and a bit more downfield?
Maybe, but I think we're stretching it a little bit. I think the big thing here is just the Kellen Moore offense that we talked about, is that they're drawing up more complex routes deeper downfield. Keenan Allen is playing a different role than we've seen in years past, where he used to just kind of line up in the slot and run those 5 to 10 yard routes. Now he's getting deeper downfield, which is giving Justin Herbert a little bit more flexibility. So I think everything we kind of said in the offseason, he's going to rush the ball more. He's going to start throwing passes deeper downfield. We're seeing that all come to fruition this year. 20 plus points in every fantasy game so far. I mean, can you keep that going for 17 consecutive weeks? That's a tall ask, but it really wouldn't surprise me. I mean, what he's doing right now, he looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and we saw it just 2 years ago. He was the QB2 in fantasy, and then he had this year where all of his pass catchers were banged up. He was dealing with broken rib cartilage. He was clearly in pain, not playing like himself, kneecapped by this Joe Lombardi offense. All of those negative factors are now out of the equation, and Justin Herbert looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the league.
You know, it's funny. We talk about injuries with the Los Angeles Chargers almost exclusively. Them and the Ravens are like the 2 teams that you see every year deal with these injuries. Always. Like, it's the same. I wonder what they're putting in the water, honestly. You got to figure there's got to be something going on there. But Justin Herbert, without Austin Eckler, personally believe has made him throw the ball downfield more. Because when he's on the field, it's a lot of checkdowns. I think it would even be a lot of checkdowns with Kellen Moore there, because he's such an effective player after the catch. I think that these injuries are going to start to come home to roost a little bit, specifically with their upcoming schedule. Now, after the bye, they get the Dallas Cowboys. Might have a little bit harder time throwing the ball downfield. And I know they don't have Diggs anymore, but Deron Bland is a still very good corner, and their defense is extremely well coached. The Chiefs, they don't typically allow a lot of downfield passes. I mean, Zach Wilson, obviously, according the only guy that can do it, which is baffling to me. Then they get the Bears, but then the Jets and the Lions. Like, the Lions defense has been surprisingly good this year, and outside of, again, one game against Geno Smith. So they do have some tough tasks coming up, and his rushing floor, while the touchdowns are fantastic, he has 20 rushes for 56 yards. So it's a little masking. It seems like he's more of a goal line guy. So I hope that when Austin Eckler does come back, those rushing touches still stay with Justin Herbert. So that's probably why I think for us, he's our 4 and not a little bit higher, because not having Mike Williams is a huge loss for them. Honestly, they have just lost Donald Parham, who was scoring red zone touchdowns for them. He was getting open quite a bit. I think he had 3 touchdowns on the year, and that can take a little bit away when you don't have some of those big body guys to really go to in the red zone. So all of this just to say that I have some caution, but at the end of the day, Kellen Moore has done a fantastic job of opening that offense. I still think that they have enough weapons to continue to throw the ball downfield. And I mean, Justin Herbert's just uncorking the ball this season. It's fantastic to watch. And one of the reasons we were all so high on Keenan Allen this year. I mean, look at this. Look what he's doing. So I'm still a big fan of Herbert, but just a little more cautionary tale. Still definitely in the top tier quarterbacks for me.
And the last thing I'll say about Herbert real quickly here, we talked about how last year they were kind of coaching him like he was a 40-year-old Drew Brees, just not letting him push the ball downfield. And the intended air yards per pass attempt show that 6.4 intended air yards per pass attempt last year, one of the lowest in the league. This year, that is up to a career high 8.8, not just a career high, but more than 1 yard higher than he's ever had in his career. And that's 6th highest in the league. So they are finally coaching Justin Herbert, to use that bazooka he's got for an arm, which we've wanted to see for years.
Yeah, I think it also helps that he has his Pro Bowl left tackle back in Rashawn Slater,
Mhm.
and we're seeing some good play from these guards, Zion Johnson and Jamari Salyer. Now, the Chargers, listen, they look phenomenal so far, at least when Herbert is out there slinging the ball for them. The defense needs to improve, but I think that still lends to a good fantasy offense.
I don't like the tone in that so far. What are you insinuating here? Do you just expect
They're
them
the
to fall
Chargers.
apart?
They're the Chargers.
Chargers.
It happens. It
It's
happens
in their
every
DNA.
year.
It is.
It's
All
welcome to
right.
October. It's spooky season. There's a lot of bad things that could happen this month.
That was a
You guys
very
don't
dark
see-
and sinister so far.
Let's move on to tier number 2 here. Taking a look at Lamar Jackson, quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens, and right now he's quarterback 4 on the year. So, Dave, I know we've talked about this a little bit, that the Ravens are not passing the ball as often as we thought. But Lamar Jackson has still been very, very efficient. This has been interesting, though. 4 passing touchdowns and 4 rushing touchdowns in 4 games. This pace, I don't think it's what we all thought. I think we thought there was going to be a lot more of the passing. Is this something he can keep up? Because it really feels like that rushing upside is what is buoying his fantasy relevance at the moment. Is that something that we think is going to stick around?
And that's why you want to draft these guys with rushing upside. We'll talk about Justin Fields a little bit later for the same exact reason. Even if they don't take big steps forward as passers, which we were hoping Lamar Jackson would in this Todd Monken offense, we were expecting the pass attempts to go up. We were expecting the air yards to go up, and we haven't seen it. I mean, he's 26 right now in intended air yards per pass attempt. He's still checking down at a pretty high rate, but you've got that insulated value and the upside that you're getting from the rushing, and there's no reason to think that that's going to change. I mean, we talked about it. A lot of these guys got off to slow starts. He had an absolute dud in week 1, but since then, 24 plus points in 3 straight weeks. Since week 2, he's the QB2 behind only Josh Allen. And he's just, he's one of the best rushers in the game. He's going to keep doing this. When there aren't receivers that are open, he's going to take off with the ball. He's going to score touchdowns. So I'm not really too concerned. If anybody's looking at the peripheral metrics and getting concerned about Lamar Jackson, I'm willing to buy low. I still look at him as a top 5 quarterback for the rest of the season. If he can take that step forward as a passer, start throwing the ball more, awesome. If he doesn't, he's got an elite rushing profile to fall back on. He's going to be fine either way.
I think people forgot that the Ravens brought in another not just the offensive coordinator, a new entire offense that they're running. It's going to take some time. And Odell Beckham Jr., we all kind of assumed he was going to get hurt, right? Unfortunately, he
kind
is
of
now
assumed
hurt.
Rashad Bateman would too, right?
Rashad Bateman, yeah, out. Look at that, they're both hurt. And when you have a brand new offense, a quarterback learning a new offense, you now have your number 1 wide receiver as a rookie learning the offense. Offensive coordinator trying to learn how all of these players mesh together. It's been 4 weeks. And they've already lost 2 wide receivers. So they're trying to learn how to adapt to this new offense on the move. And they just put up 28 points against arguably the best defense in football, the Cleveland Browns, going into that game. And Lamar, he was 186 yards passing, but he was 15 of 19. He was efficient. And welcome back, Mark Andrews. Thank you very much for returning to form last week against the Browns, because when you have your number 1 player in the passing game coming back and playing like that, it's not just a safety valve for Lamar Jackson. It's an explosive play factory. And that allows them to be able to throw the ball downfield, get inside the 5, and then let Lamar Jackson take everything. Because, Gus Bus, you're a good goal line back. Lamar Jackson's better. They don't have J.K. Dobbins for the rest of the season, so those rushing touches that I think were going to go to J.K. Dobbins are more likely going to go to Lamar Jackson now. And the efficiency game is what this is for the Baltimore Ravens. When they get healthy, the rest of the offense should be able to take off a little bit. But right now, the fact that they were able to do that without Rashad Bateman, without Odell Beckham Jr., and be that efficient against that defense, that should give us all a lot of optimism about this offense going forward as they get more comfortable in their system.
Now let's take a look at quarterback number 6 here in the same tier. And I mean, this is the rookie quarterback that a lot of us thought could be another Lamar Jackson, another Jalen Hurts. And boy, is he proving everybody right. Anthony Richardson, right now, he's the quarterback 15 on the season because he missed week 3. But if you take a look at the fantasy points per game, Anthony Richardson is the quarterback 3 in fantasy. 3 passing touchdowns, 4 rushing touchdowns, and 3 starts. I know I had a similar question for Lamar Jackson. Can Anthony Richardson keep this up? This almost seems more like Anthony Richardson has to keep up the rushing to make that offense work. Whereas Lamar, I think we haven't quite scratched the surface of what he can do as a passer. I know Anthony Richardson, it's going to develop over time. We may not see that all happen here in his rookie year, but I mean, we can't argue it. Daniel, we said this before we even started recording. We can't argue with results right now. He's been a top 4 quarterback in every game that he has finished. He's finished 2 games. He was quarterback 4 and quarterback 2, respectively, in those. It's absolutely insane to think we might be too low on Anthony Richardson right now. Daniel, I know you did a lot of film review on Richardson as a rookie coming into the draft. Are we too low?
I mean, we're kind of like you said, we're scratching the surface with what they can do. And as Shane Steichen gets more comfortable with his playmakers, I mean, the answer is yes. We could absolutely be too low on Anthony Richardson because, yes, he had 11 completions out of 25 attempts. But look at like half of his completions. The aliens are the guys that make the throws that he was able to make in some of these games. And they're also able to do what he does running the football. And now we're seeing that Jonathan Taylor might be back this week to practice or should be back this week to practice. I think that only helps him personally. You get an actual solid run game going behind his run game. You can open up a little more of the play action stuff, which hasn't been available to them up until I think when he does end up coming back. Yeah, it might take away some of the rushing floor for Anthony Richardson. I mean, Zach Moss is not exactly a guy that I want to have leading my backfield personally. Not my running back of choice, but
hey, he looked great for the last 3 weeks, though. We got to give it to him. He actually did look pretty solid. I mean, he's no Jonathan Taylor, but we got to give him his due.
I'm going to credit that to Anthony Richardson personally. I'll be very honest with you, but that's another thing.
Well, what about those games that Richardson wasn't in there? Moss still looks solid. We won't take this Moss slander on our show.
I'm not a Moss guy. Just not a Moss guy. That's okay. We'll see Jonathan Taylor back, but we absolutely could be too low on Anthony Richardson. But the fact that we are as high as we are on him for the rest of the season at QB6, I find it hard to believe he'll finish higher than these guys the rest of the season. I don't think it's impossible though. I have no doubt about that.
So I'll take the contrarian approach and say that I think that we haven't valued where he should be, because I think that there is some regression that could potentially be due. I mean, right now he's pacing for 23 rushing touchdowns. I mean, he's great at what he does, but I don't think that is sustainable. And the other thing that kind of jumps out to me that's a little bit concerning here is his yards after the catch from his receivers. Yards after the catch per attempt ranks 2nd highest in the league. And we're not talking about like an elite set of playmakers here. This is Michael Pittman on busted coverage on a screen. This is Mo Alley Cox just tanking down the seam for a huge touchdown. I'll make the pun here being with the Colts, but I think he's got a horseshoe somewhere. I mean, there have been some plays that have really broken his way. And don't get me wrong, he's a very, very good talent. But I don't know if he's got, I think if you look at his ability to get better, and you look at regression that could potentially hit off of some of these unsustainable metrics, I think we've got him valued exactly where he should be. Yeah, he could finish better than he is right now if he continues to develop. He could also get hit with the regression bug and finish worse than we have him right now. So I think where we have him, QB6, perfectly reasonable.
I'm curious, the stat you're mentioning there, the yards after catch per reception with these receivers, is that just from Anthony Richardson or is that from the Colts offense overall?
Just from Anthony Richardson. For whatever reason, Gardner Minshew, it wasn't hitting that same way when Gardner Minshew was playing. Let me scroll way down the list here. Gardner Minshew was getting 3.7 yards after the catch, which was the 2nd lowest in the league. And then Anthony Richardson was getting 6.2, which is the 2nd highest. So maybe you can argue that Richardson's rushing upside pulls the defense tighter, makes them play a little closer to the line, which opens up the back of the defense. But I just see that as being kind of unsustainable. When you look at the other teams that have this really high yards after the catch, it's the teams that you would expect it from. Tua Tagovialoa sitting atop that list with 6.4. Obviously, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devin Achane, Raheem Mostert doing the things that they do. But, seeing Richardson up there with Michael Pittman and Josh Downs and Mo Alley Cox and Kylan Granson, I expect that to come a little bit back down to earth. So QB6, totally reasonable, but it's tough to put him higher than that right now.
Fair.
Yeah, I think I'm with you that I think we have him ranked pretty appropriately, because to go off of what Daniel said, I don't know that he's going to finish ahead of any of these guys that are ranked ahead of him right now. But then you start to look below at the rankings we have underneath him, and I don't know that any of those guys are going to be jumping ahead of Anthony Richardson unless they can have some serious upside that just gets unleashed here. Now, before we move on to our quarterback number 7, I want to let you guys know we have our weekly rankings over on footballguys.com, and they are 100% free. It's featuring Dave, myself, other various analysts here at Football Guys, and we also have custom waiver wire, start sit advice, projections, all custom to your team and league for just $3.99 a month. It is the best value in fantasy football, and all you have to do, click the link in the show description down below to get started, and you're going to be getting custom advice for your team every single week and start getting those wins. Guys, let's move on to our quarterback number 7 here. It makes my heart smile to say it's Tua Tagovailoa, and he's been the quarterback 6 in the season. Now, it's been kind of an up and down season for Tua, despite the success of the Miami Dolphins. Like I said, quarterback 6, he has had 2 top 2 quarterback performances and then 2 games outside of the top 15. It seems like right now that AFC East plays Tua and the Dolphins really hard to the point where we don't get the same type of explosion. This is a small sample size, just 4 weeks. Dave, are we seeing Tua as a kind of safe quarterback with good upside, or is he more of a risky boom bust guy that's going to be more matchup dependent?
I think he is somewhat matchup dependent, but the good news is it's kind of easy to predict when these are going to come. Like the Patriots, good defense, and he didn't do great against them. The Bills, really good defense, didn't do too great against them. But meanwhile, he lit up the Chargers and the Broncos. So when you start looking, the Giants have not had a good defense. So this week, week 5, go ahead and start Tua. The Panthers don't have a great defense. You can start him there. Philadelphia in week 7, that's when you might want to think about benching him and maybe looking at the waiver wire or somewhere else. I think you can play him dependent on matchups, but this is what we talked about. And this is why once we get through that top 6, the thing that all 6 of these guys have in common is rushing upside. The rushing upside gives you that safe floor. Tua doesn't have that. I mean, he's quick to just, I mean, he's great at what he does. Don't get me wrong. He is probably a better real life quarterback than he is a fantasy quarterback, but he throws the ball so quickly. He rarely takes off with his legs. And that's why you see these 4 games where he can give you 12, 13, 14 points. You're very rarely going to see those types of games from the guys that we have ahead of him in this list. So I think he's a great quarterback. When he has a good matchup, throwing the ball to the guys that he gets to throw the ball to gives him just as high of a ceiling as anybody else, but you do have to be a little bit concerned for that week-to-week floor.
You're telling me you don't want a quarterback? You don't think he's a rushing quarterback and he has 15 yards rushing on the season? 11 attempts? I mean, maybe there's something to that. I'll be honest. It's hard to put Tua any higher specifically because of the offensive line. When you don't have the rushing floor and their offensive line, who I saw Teron Armstead walking off on crutches after the game, that's a terrible thing for their offensive line. And the Bills may have helped them out going out through the season because what they were doing was dropping their linebackers into zones right where Tua was looking, taking away that first read. So that might have helped what they're doing for the rest of the season to give Tua more quick answers to what defenses are going to do, which is just, hi, I'm a linebacker. I'm in your throwing lane. You're not going to be able to throw it here. You can't really do that. But that's what Tua wants to do. He wants to snap, either play fake, and then throw the football. If there's anybody in the way, he's not going to throw it, or he's going to throw an interception. So that could definitely help them going forward. My problem is if you're having him go through read 1, 2, and 3, where's the time? If your offensive line is as bad as it has been, and it's going to get worse, I have some concerns about Tua going forward, but I also don't really think I can put him any lower because what we've seen from the offense, the explosivity, putting Devin Achan in there is just a whole different area because they have speed everywhere. Raheem Mostert is still a fast guy. You have just so much speed everywhere that two of these plays, any game can break and he can still go over 20 points weekly. So while I understand the matchup dependent stuff, I would be hard pressed to bench him unless you have like a surefire quarterback matchup, just because Tua and Tyreek and Jalen Waddle and the running backs, it's so difficult for me to have that conversation. So there's going to be some real fights with yourself going through this season to try to bench him if you ever come up against it.
I think all of our biases are going to show a little bit talking about Tua and talking about the next guy, but I think you guys got it wrong. I think the next guy should be ahead of Tua.
And we still think you're wrong, and that's okay. And that's okay. It's very hard at this point in the season going forward, especially if you don't have any other starting quarterbacks, to bench a guy that has top 2 potential in any given week.
Yeah.
And I don't think we know enough yet to say that Tua and the Miami Dolphins offense is matchup dependent. I think that we've seen them go up against 2 of the better defenses in the league, and that Bills defense is very, very scary. Miami's lost 10 of their last 11 games against the Bills. Something there where Buffalo has their number. Dave, I know you're just brimming right here. Like, you are ready to explode if we don't talk about this guy, because at number 8, we've got Justin Fields. He is the quarterback 12 on the season, and he wasn't quarterback 12 until this past week. He had just 2 multi-touchdown games in the season. I'm talking total touchdowns until this past week. Threw for 4 touchdowns against Denver. He was a quarterback 3 on the week. We haven't quite seen the rushing upside yet. Only one finish inside the top 15 this year, and that was last week. Dave, are we going to see... There's so many questions with the Chicago Bears offense. Just so many questions. Are we going to see Justin Fields actually use the rushing upside? Are we going to see the Chicago Bears offense do anything similar to like what they were able to do this past week? Give us the answers.
I mean, we talked about this a lot in the offseason, and I think that last year's rushing output was really a symptom of them not having any wide receivers, not having an offensive line. I mean, over 50% of his rushing attempts last year weren't designed rushes. It was the pocket breaking down around him, receivers' inability to get open downfield, and he had to run the ball. So I talked about this a lot, that they were building a pass-centric offense. They beefed up the offensive line. They brought in DJ Moore. Darnell Mooney was coming back healthy. I always joke that I didn't expect Claypool to be a huge factor in this offense, but I certainly didn't expect him to be a healthy scratch by week 4 either, but they're still getting it done without Claypool. And through Justin Fields' first 2 years, he threw 200-plus yards in 23% of his starts. He's already hit that mark in 3 of 4. 75% of his games this year, including a career-high 335 yards on Sunday. So we saw it that Justin Fields was a very prolific passer in college, and I think that's what they wanted to revert to this year, was getting him to stay in the pocket, getting him to throw the ball downfield, and that was a huge change. Like we talked about, the learning curve with Justin Herbert and the learning curve with Lamar Jackson in these new offenses. They might have the same staff in Chicago, but this is a new offense that they are teaching him to run. Last year, he was just running free all over the field, and we've seen him take steps forward every single week. So yeah, right now he's rushing for less than half of what he did, but he is still putting up QB1 numbers in fantasy. And the last thing I want to say is that his start to the season was tough. The Packers have a good offense, and this was a good defense, and this was the first time that we saw Justin Fields playing in this new role where he wanted to stay in the pocket, and he struggled. The Bucs have a smothering defense, and he struggled there as well. The Chiefs have a very good defense as well. When we finally saw him get to play up against a soft defense, he lit him up, and he looked like the passer that we wanted to see him be this year. And now his upcoming schedule: Commanders, Vikings, Raiders, Chargers, Saints, it really softens up. And if you want to look way ahead at the fantasy playoffs, he's got the Cardinals and the Falcons in weeks 16 and 17. So I'm trying to buy low on Justin Fields where I can. I have him ahead of you guys a little bit. We've kind of been in lockstep through the first few guys that we talked about, but I would prefer Justin Fields ahead of Tua Tagovialoa. I have him in the same tier as Anthony Richardson for the rest of the season.
Yeah, we heard all about that when we put our rankings in before the show. So yeah, I understand. Trust me, I understand the optimism with Justin Fields. And the only thing that I have concerns about, well, actually, it's all systemic. Their entire offensive scheme is awful. It's terrible. It's no good. It's crap. And when you have
very eloquent,
you know, I'm known for speaking words.
You're a wordsmith.
I mean, honestly, and I did a little comparison. Last year at this time, through 4 weeks, he was quarterback 30. Which is interesting enough. He's quarterback 12 through first 4 weeks. That's helpful for him. He had 34 rushes this last year through the first 4 weeks. He has 28 this year. So you have a little bit of the same stuff. He really took off last year after week 4 and started to run the ball more and get those big play touchdowns. When you add DJ Moore and you want them to throw the football more, you're hoping that this offense explodes in some way, shape, or form. Now, the Denver Broncos helped aid them into that department last week. It definitely helped playing a bad defense. And I think that their schedule, yeah, like you said, it opens up a little bit. You have all of the, I think the Saints will be very tough for him. Personally, I even think this week against the Commanders is going to be a little more tough for him. Trying to run the ball. They have some good athletes in the secondary and speed at linebacker and really good front four that'll be tough to run away from. So I'm just worried about the offensive line, the offense itself, who's getting fired, when they're getting fired. There's a lot of stuff that could happen in this season that could really change the direction of where the Bears go.
Well, Tevin Jenkins is getting activated off IR, so he'll be back this weekend. That'll be a huge help for the offensive line as well. But again, we like to go down narrative street here. This is a Football Guys show. Shout out Sigmund Bloom. Can we go down the narrative that Justin Fields is just a slow starter? Because you talked about last year, the QB 30 through week 4, QB 3 from week 5 onward. If you look at Justin Fields' rookie season, in his first few starts, 3.9 points, 8.3 points, 8.8 points, 4.2 points, and then in his final 4 starts of his rookie season, 26.3, 19.1, 20.4, 17. So maybe, just maybe, going down narrative street here, maybe Justin Fields is just a slow starter. And then once he can kind of shake the rust off, get a little bit more loose as the season goes on, then we see that upside. I am willing to buy low on Justin Fields for all the reasons that we've talked about here.
I think also one of the big things here is may not just be the slow start. It may just be that after a few weeks, Justin Fields goes, oh man, I got to run the ball a bit more. And that's where the fantasy value lies. And so I think that's what we'll probably end up seeing here as well. Let's go to quarterback number 9 here. And it is Kirk Cousins of the Minnesota Vikings. Through week 3, he was the quarterback 1 overall. And then we saw one rough week here against the Carolina Panthers where, he didn't really look like himself, or maybe depending on your view of Kirk Cousins, he looked just like himself. He dropped the quarterback 7 here. Now, the Vikings still have the 3rd easiest remaining strength of schedule for fantasy quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins still has Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, and just a good offense around him and a bad defense. So everything should stay the same, more or less. Daniel, is Kirk Cousins kind of that just perfect, safe streamer quarterback every week where you may not get that crazy upside, but you don't really have to worry about him all that much?
Absolutely. He's done 11 touchdowns this year. That's the most of any quarterback in the NFL. And I think that it's the perfect pairing. It's the perfect pairing because their defense is so bad. It's just awful that they have to throw the ball in nearly every game that they're in. And the Panthers game, that was just funky. It was funky. They threw the ball 19 times. They had a defensive score. They never really felt threatened by the Panthers offense because it just is. And it is what it is. And I do think that Kirk Cousins is just going to have to throw the football so many times this year to be able to compete with it. He could just finish the season top 5, top 6 quarterback. So we could be a little low on Kirk Cousins if their defense continues to be as bad and they just have to continue to throw the ball just to keep in contention.
Kirk Cousins is one of those guys that... Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Alfredo.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say Kirk Cousins is one of those guys that projects really well and will likely have a solid finish to the season. Could be a top 6, top 8, top 10 guy. But it's that weekly floor that just scares me so much, and that's why I advised against drafting him this year. We saw the floor last week. We saw the floor last year when he played against Indianapolis and scored 2.2 points. An actual starting NFL quarterback did that. So his end-of-season finish always kind of deludes you into thinking that he's a good fantasy option, but the highs are high and the lows are low, and I personally think that we have Kirk Cousins in the wrong tier. I think he should be down 1 tier below. I don't think he belongs in the same tier as Justin Fields, Tua Tagovialoa, Anthony Richardson, and Lamar Jackson. I think he's a tier below these guys because of that absolutely shaky floor.
I don't know. It's hard to say shaky floor. His worst game so far this year, quarterback 22. I know that we see some up and downs, but I don't know. I don't know that I see the same floor as you, Dave. Let's go to our next guy here, quarterback number 10, who you, by your own admission, have him ahead of Kirk Cousins. This is a guy that seems to have a good floor, relatively let's call it average upside, but he's just been really good for NFL football. It's Brock Purdy, quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. He's quarterback 11 on the season. And guys, he has not thrown an interception in 2023.
Way to jinx him. We're going to see at least 3 in week 5 now, aren't we?
Yep. That's exactly what happened when I said it for Jared Goff. He threw an interception, and since then he's been a pick machine. But honestly, looking at Brock Purdy for his career, this isn't just a recent thing. He's got a 4.5 to 1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's just been a good quarterback. And it's crazy to think that so many of the fantasy heads were thinking that Trey Lance has a chance here. Not quite. Brock Purdy has been great for the San Francisco 49ers offense, the just bevy of weapons that he has at his disposal every single week. He's been a top 13 quarterback in 3 of 4 games this year. So you don't necessarily get that crazy upside, but you do get a really solid floor, Dave. So is Brock Purdy a guy that you're just willing to start every week, regardless of matchup?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, when you're throwing to the likes of Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle, and you're playing behind that offensive line, yeah, I don't see why not. And he's got, kind of sneaky athleticism. We saw him push a touchdown in with his legs last week. He also had a big Christian McCaffrey touchdown, which he threw backwards, so it counted as a rushing attempt, but left a lot of meat on the bone last week. It's crazy to say, and I'm not saying that Brock Purdy is Patrick Mahomes by any means, but from a fantasy perspective, you look at the floor games, you look at the ceiling games, you look at the overall output, Brock Purdy has giving you similar production to Patrick Mahomes so far this year. I don't care what you think about his talent. I mean, I think a lot of people have concerns about his overall talent, but being in the system, being with these playmakers, there's no reason not to look at him as a top 10 quarterback every single week in fantasy.
Yeah, I do wonder what happens if some of these guys are not available. There's been questionable medical histories for all of those skill players you've mentioned: McCaffrey, Kittle, Deebo, Ayuk. I don't want to jinx it, knock on all the wood in my office here, but I wonder. I want to see what happens with Purdy, and it's more of like a curiosity thing. What happens with Purdy if those guys aren't there? Is this still just a Shanahan quarterback that's able to make things happen? I kind of think so. Let's go to our 11th quarterback here. And it's CJ Stroud, the rookie quarterback for the Houston Texans. Daniel Harms, this young man is quarterback 10 on the season. He is on pace to shatter the rookie passing yards record. He hasn't thrown an interception this season, which, that's unheard of, this kind of rookie production. Last time we saw a guy doing this, it was Justin Herbert, who finished as the quarterback 9 as a rookie. Mm-hmm. Stroud is quarterback 10 currently. Is this something where, I think a lot of people might say, oh, he's a rookie, it's not going to last. Are we potentially missing out on a guy who's a top 9 quarterback, just like Herbert was as a rookie?
I mean, we could be. Like, look at their offensive line. It's not even healthy, and they're still doing it. They just did it against the Steelers, who have a fantastic rush. They made it look minuscule. Like it didn't phase CJ Stroud. Watch the game. He is not phased by pressure in the slightest. He stands in the pocket. He gets the ball out with anticipation to a dot. You could put one of those targets out there, 25 yards down the field on the sideline, he could hit it. He knows what he's doing. I don't even really know how to describe how fantastic he's been in terms of pocket presence and getting outside the pocket when he has to and making plays to all the playmakers. I think we really underrated the Robert Woods effect on this entire receiving room. His effort, much like Brandon Ayuk, you can kind of see the same type of the blocking effort, the way that they can get open and just keep the chains moving. They don't have to generate the big plays all the time. And Robert Woods has done a fantastic job there. And then we've finally seen the Nico Collins breakout because of CJ Stroud throwing the ball on the money down the field, where he's got, half a step on a guy. But when you're 6'4" and have like 34-inch arms, that's like 3 steps on a guy, especially at a quarter. So yeah, we absolutely could be, but kind of in the same breath with Brock Purdy, they both are carrying lucky horseshoes somewhere, like Dave was talking about earlier. They are not throwing picks, but they're going to. I think Purdy's sooner than Stroud, mostly because we've seen 5, I think, drop off of defenders' hands from him this season, much like last year, where I think it was like 7 dropped interceptions. So he's going to come back down to reality a little bit after more film comes out, and Bobby Slowick is having to make more adjustments as the season goes along. But I love what CJ Stroud's done this year, and he easily, in my opinion, could finish as a top 10 quarterback this year.
Yeah, Stroud has been phenomenal. I think the thing that all of us have seen and what people are most worried about is, can he create outside of his comfort zone, right? Can he get out of the pocket, run around and make those throws downfield? Because this isn't Ohio State, this isn't going up against Big Ten defenses all the time. And he has proven that he can do it. So guys, we got 4 more quarterbacks that we're going to talk about, including 3 that were actually being drafted in the top 10 of fantasy football drafts before the season. So what are we going to do with guys like Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, all these big names that we were counting on? It's been a little disappointing. We're going to continue this conversation over on the audio version of this show. You can join us by just simply clicking the link to your favorite podcast platform in the description down below, and we'll catch you on the other side. Adios.